Alright, this video is for the students that are trying to accomplish the mechanical hand. So we're going to be making little parts for our mechanical hand and showing you how to kind of glue them together in different various ways and why you would choose different ways over other ways. So we're going to be making these out of primitives. Okay, so rule number one, you can use any primitive in Maya. That includes any of the primitives that is under polygon primitives, which in some cases you got a helix and a platonic solid, and you got planes. But so if you don't see something in here that best represents the shape that you're trying to get, feel free to add or use any of the other polygon primitives here in Maya. Alright, so it starts with this. Okay, just know that 6 on the keyboard goes into weight shading mode, and every shape has a shape node. Okay, so your shape node can be found over here in the channel box. Here's your shape node for this, and I can click on these, drag, and then middle mouse button, click and drag over here to add more edge loops into the area. Okay. Important to know that the shape node will exist until we do two things. One, if I command D and duplicate the object, the shape node no longer exists. Okay. Two, if I take the object and I go edit delete by type history, the shape node no longer exists. Okay, as long as you know those two things and how the shape node disappears, you should be okay. Keep in mind all objects have a shape node. All of them can be upped with the polygon and all have different results, like this pyramid, for example. It's a pyramid, and if you go into the shape node and say number of sides, it only goes to 4 in this case, but you can add more divisions and you can up the other shape and put a cap on it if you want, and the cap is at the bottom. So different things react differently to the shape node. Okay, now taking two shapes and putting them together in various ways. Let's look at that for a second. We have shape 1, and if I take shape 1 and rotate it 90 degrees in Z and take this shape, command D it, and put it right over here. Okay, shape 1 and shape 2, two different shapes. When you right click on one, go to vertex, you only see the vertex of the one shape until you go over here and go to vertex on that one. But still you can't highlight vertices across two different shapes. Okay. So know that there's two different methods to join shapes, and if you go to polygons and you go mesh combine, what this does is combine it in such a way that you can now share components. Okay. To take this away or get back to its initial state, you have to go mesh separate. Now each object's pivot point is screwed up, so you have to go in here, highlight both objects, and modify center pivot. So in that case, you're treating the part as a whole object in case you want to rotate the two of them together. But let's say part 1 and part 2 are independent of each other. Part 1 needs to rotate. Well, let me show you how that works. If I hit D on the keyboard in the front view here, move the pivot point here, I can now, when I do rotate, it rotates on that pivot point. Okay. Now, if I grab object A, then object B, and then hit P on the keyboard, that will parent it. Okay, and what that means is If I take and rotate this object, it rotates based upon its pivot. And keep in mind, it can change. The pivot point can move with D on the keyboard, so you got this. Let's say this is rotated up just a little bit. I can now go in here and take this part and rotate it, and it'll rotate. This one, if it rotates, still rotates now both objects. The way to see this in all its glory is hypergraph hierarchy. Here, you can see the bond that these two share. Okay, this top object is the shape node. Okay, and how shape history. So anytime you see the white, that's a history item, and then the blue is a mesh item. Okay, if you want to get rid of the history item, you just go edit, delete by type history, and that should get rid of it. But if it's bonded to a parent-child relationship, it's not going to go away anytime soon. So here's how you do that. You just take object, boom, and now that should be okay without the shape node. Keep in mind, at the end here, I want everything named conventionally. So in this case, fingertip 1, finger 1, finger 2. You have to think about how many fingers there are. So an index 1, index 2, middle finger 1, middle finger 2. So you have to name everything very conventionally here. So when you grab it, you can either grab it here or you can grab it using hierarchy. Here's a little tip real quick, is the fact that if I have a cylinder out there and I already did rotate it, and I take it and name it index 1, when I duplicate this using Command D, you notice what happens. Well, it names it with a new increment, index 1, index 2. So if you name your stuff first and then duplicate it, you will save yourself a step, a huge headache. This object is white because it has history on it, so delete by type history. And in some cases, this will be white. Okay. In this case, in the scene, there's nothing else except for these two meshes. I will accept that. Alright, now another thing when considering doing this project is the fact that I want it aesthetically pleasing. Just using cubes or cylinders together, that's kind of boring. What we need to do is kind of look at adding a bunch of shapes together in different various ways, and I'm going to be covering that in the next video.